DIY gift giving can be a little bit stressful if you don't have a plan in place. So right now I am testing all of my recipes and all of my packaging processes, so that way when the holiday arrives, I can just easily make sourdough for gifts. I am testing my cinnamon roll dough, so I can use half of it for a sourdough snowflake, which I'll show you how to do in just a minute. It's beautiful. And then the other half I'm going to test to make individual cinnamon rolls that I package in these really cute containers. So the deal is with holiday gift giving or making sourdough for holiday gift giving is it's a lot easier if you can make one batch of dough and then use it in a couple of different ways. So here I am making my regular cinnamon roll dough, but I actually use coconut oil for this, and I did not have any coconut oil, so I tested this with butter. And this is a really important point because what I found through testing it with butter is I did not like it as much with butter. It wasn't bad, but it was definitely not up to the quality that I would want for gifting sourdough cinnamon rolls or a sourdough snowflake to someone else. And this is really important to know now, so that way I know to get coconut oil and to stick with the original recipe. These are the things you want to learn before you give the gift, so that way you can make the gift and it's exactly what you want it to be. Now, if you are making multiple batches of dough, which I am, to show you a couple of things and to test some different recipes, make sure you label those bowls. Sourdough ferments for a number of hours, and as you'll see in this video, that dough stayed in the fridge for 3 days, and after a couple of days, you might forget what dough is in what bowl. But while all of that stuff is fermenting and you're testing the recipes, the other thing that's really important to get worked out is how you're going to package your sourdough. Different types of baked goods require different types of packaging, which I'll show you in this video, but I am just making one type of gift tag, and then everything is going to have that on it. So here I have these little printable gift tags that you can get over my blog at moonandmagnolia.com. I will leave a link for that below in the description box. And then my daughter and I are just stringing some little jingle bells on some red and white baker's twine and then attaching it to those tags. And we made a bunch of these, so that way when everything is finished baking and we're ready to pack it, we already have those tags ready to go. There are endless options out there, from jingle bells to ornaments, fake holly, different types of ribbon. Really, the world is your oyster, but I do encourage you to just pick one method and stick with it so you can really just get in a groove and make all of those tags. One of the nice things about gifting sourdough versus other types of baked goods is that the dough can cold proof in the fridge for up to 3 days, sometimes even more. So that means you can pace the process when you're actually making these for gifts. So you don't have to bake everything on one day. You can make the dough and then bake it at your convenience or as you need it for different holiday gatherings. So here I took half of that sourdough cinnamon roll dough, and then I put one half in the fridge for later, and the other half I divided into 4 portions and then rolled them out into about an 8-inch circle. And just for reference, I think each of those circles were probably about 1/8 of an inch thick or so. You definitely don't want them too thick. It's better to err on the side of too thin than too thick for this. And then on each layer, I brushed on some melted butter and then sprinkled it with a mixture of cinnamon, brown sugar, and granulated sugar. And I recommend recipe testing this and seeing how much sugar cinnamon mixture you like in between the layers. I don't think I used enough in this case. Then I'm just taking a tablespoon and making an imprint of a circle. That's just a guide so you know not to cut past that line. And then what I did is I quartered the dough, so it was 4 triangles. Then I cut those triangles in half, so it was 8 triangles. And then I cut them in half again, so it ended up being 16 triangles. Then you take 2 pieces or 2 triangles that are side by side, twist them away from each other, pinch the ends together, and then tuck it underneath. Then I set this aside to proof until it was slightly puffy. And then once it was ready to bake, I just brushed it with an egg wash and then baked it for about 20, maybe 25 minutes at 375. You could definitely fill this with Nutella. I think it'd be really good too with Trader Joe's cookie butter. It's really up to you. And then once it was completely cool, I sprinkled it with a little bit of powdered sugar, which was really pretty. But remember, if it is a little bit warm, that powdered sugar will dissolve, and it will dissolve eventually. So I wouldn't sprinkle the powdered sugar on until right before you're ready to package it and give it. Now, I put this in one of these little bread bags. They're actually the easiest way, I think, to package these larger pieces of sourdough. But what I don't like about them is it's kind of hard to put a tag on it. You could definitely use a cute little sticker or something like that. But I put my little tag on here and I think it looked okay, but it wasn't quite as finished as I liked. However, as I mentioned before, I really like how easy these little bags are and that you can see straight through them because you can see how beautiful that snowflake is in there. Okay, we'll get back to the rest of that cinnamon roll dough in a minute, but next I want to show you how to make a really easy and beautiful babka holiday wreath. Now, for this babka dough, I am using the entire batch of the dough to make one large wreath, but one thing that I think is really important to keep in mind when it comes to gifting sourdough is you can make smaller versions of everything. Make one or two batches of dough and make little mini loaves of bread. Make little mini wreaths or make small sourdough snowflakes. Whatever it is you're making, you can make a little bit smaller so that way you don't have to make so much dough. But in this case, I am making one large wreath. So I have the sourdough babka dough in the fridge. It stayed in the fridge for another 2 or 3 days. Now I can't remember how many days my dough is in the fridge, but it stayed in the fridge for a few days. And now I am assembling the actual babka itself. So first, I am making the chocolate filling, which is a combination of butter, chocolate chips, cocoa powder, and powdered sugar. In the past, I used granulated sugar for my babka filling, and it just was not as good. I couldn't get the texture right, but the powdered sugar definitely did the trick. So that is what I'll be sticking with when I make this for my holiday gifts. I'm dividing the dough in half and then rolling each half into a large rectangle, each the exact same size if possible. One tip for rolling out dough like this is to do it while it's cold. So if your dough's been in the fridge, don't take it out and let it come to room temperature. Take it out and immediately roll it. It's just a little bit easier to shape that way. That chocolate filling needs to cool off, so I let it sit for about 30 minutes or so, and just to speed up that process, I just stirred it up every few minutes to help it cool off a little bit faster. And then once it's cool, I am just smoothing half of the chocolate filling on one portion of the dough and then the remaining half on the other portion of the dough. And you don't want to take the filling all the way to the edges because that will make it really hard to roll and shape later. So I leave about a 1/2 inch border around the dough and then roll the dough long edge to long edge. And once you get that dough rolled, pinch the seam so it's nice and closed. And then I like to take a bench cutter and then cut off the ends of the dough where it's not very tidy. That just makes a nice clean braid later. Then take a serrated knife and then just cut each roll in half long ways. And then you're simply just twisting the two pieces. As you're twisting them, just make sure you're keeping those ribbons of chocolate facing up. You don't want any of them to turn down. That will affect the aesthetic of the wreath once you bake it. Then once you have both strands twisted, transfer them to a parchment lined baking sheet. And then you're just connecting those ends so you can make a circle. I tried to make it look like those ends were braided. It can be a little confusing which side goes to which at that point, but as best as you can, connect those two ends and then tuck the loose pieces under so that way they don't lift when you bake it. I let this proof for about an hour or so until it was just slightly puffy and then baked it at 375 for about 25 minutes or so. Then to gift this, I would recommend moving it to a clean piece of parchment paper because a lot of that chocolate leaks out. So I used a pizza paddle just to move it to a clean sheet of paper. And now I am decorating this with little cranberries just to make it festive. You could definitely take little toothpicks and fix those cranberries in there so they don't move. I did not do that in this case because I'm just testing it. But it's really up to you. You could decorate this with whatever you wanted. Little sprigs of rosemary would be pretty in one spot. You could use cherries instead of cranberries. If you are going to gift this to someone and take it somewhere, you probably need a pizza-sized box for it. But you could also make a couple of small wreaths and then they would fit in a cake box, which I'm going to show you toward the end of this video. But that's a good example of why you should know what type of packaging you need beforehand because it ended up being a lot bigger than what I was anticipating, and I don't have any packaging big enough for it. Okay, let's get back to the sourdough cinnamon roll dough. So half I used for the sourdough snowflake as you saw earlier in the video, and now I am rolling out the other half to make a batch of cinnamon rolls. And what I really like about this is now I have one larger gift that say I can give to a family, and now I can make 8 or 9, I can't quite remember how many cinnamon rolls I got out of this, we'll see in a second, but now I can make like 8, 9, or 10 cinnamon rolls that I can give as individual gifts. So it's not really that much more work for me, but I get about a dozen or so gifts that I can give with 1 or 2 baking sessions. Because cinnamon rolls are designed to be served individually, they make great gifts for office parties, for neighbors, for friends, where you want to give one person just a little something. Whereas a snowflake might be a little bit better to give to a family or a couple, for example, where they might be sharing it. To package cinnamon rolls, I use these cute little aluminum tins. I found these on Amazon. I'll leave links for these products in the description box if you want to check them out for your gift giving. But you could bake the cinnamon rolls individually if you wanted to in these, but it looks cleaner if you transfer them. And I also think they taste better if you bake them together like that, because almost all of the sides stay nice and soft, but it's really up to you. To package these, I'm taking a really long piece of red and white baker's twine and I'm taping it on the bottom. The little tins are kind of slippery, so you'll probably want a piece of tape to hold it in place. And then I'm just wrapping it around the tin as many times as I can. 3 or 4 wraps around the container looks a little more polished than just one. It just adds a nice aesthetic. Then I attached one of the tags that my daughter and I made and just a little piece of fake evergreen. This would also be a really great place to put a little Christmas ornament if you wanted to, because those containers are kind of firm and they can hold the weight of that without it affecting the sourdough inside. And this was actually one of my favorite ways that I packaged all of the things that I baked because it just looked really cute. Making regular no-knead sourdough bread is also a really good gift, and it's a really easy way to customize something for the person you're giving it to. So I always recommend when you're gifting food, and in this case sourdough, to make what the person you're giving it to enjoys. I think it's a little easy sometimes to get wrapped up in making things for people that we like to eat, but remember, the other person has to eat this. So I do bake with a lot of fresh milled flour, but not everybody in my life likes fresh milled flour, but just about everyone I know can get behind a 50-50 split of all-purpose and fresh milled. So I am making a double batch of no-knead sourdough bread with half all-purpose and half hard white wheat. One of the things I like about gifting sourdough like this is you can divide this dough into as many portions as you want, all the way down to as small as dinner rolls or making 2, maybe even 1 giant loaf of sourdough if that's what you want to do. So depending on how many people you're baking for, you can scale that dough and then divide it into as many portions as you want. For gift giving, I really like to add inclusions into my sourdough. Inclusions are just other ingredients that you're adding into the dough. In this case, I am making a cranberry walnut sourdough. I have this recipe over on my blog at moonandmagnolia.com. I will leave a link for that in the description box. It's one of my favorites for holiday gift giving. But what I really like about inclusions is that you have this one base recipe, your regular no-knead sourdough bread dough, and then you can start customizing the inclusions based upon what the recipient likes. And the possibilities are endless here. You could do cranberry walnut, you could do a cheddar jalapeno. I actually have a cheddar jalapeno sourdough recipe on my blog. I'll link that below. There are herb and cheese options. I've seen chocolate chips. One that I see circulating online a lot is blueberries and cream cheese. I haven't tried that one, but I've heard it's really good. There are so many options out there. So just look online for some ideas and then you can start adding those inclusions into your dough. One of the places where people run into a few questions though about making many batches of sourdough bread is how do you bake all of that? And there are a couple ways you can do that. One, you can cold proof that dough and just bake them as you need over the course of a few days. In this case, I actually just baked both loaves at the same time because I have 2 Dutch ovens. But if you're making, say, like 3 or 4 or more loaves of bread and you need them all at once, but you don't have multiple Dutch ovens or that amount of time, you can do an open bake. I didn't do that with these, but if you go over to my blog at moonandmagnolia.com and search for bread bowls, and I'll leave a link for this in the description box too, I detail how to bake multiple loaves of sourdough through an open bake with steam. So essentially all you do is you put a big skillet or pan in the bottom of your oven and let it get really hot with the oven to create steam. And then you bake all of the bread on a cookie sheet or a baking sheet in the open. That steam helps create the rise and helps keep the crust really nice without needing multiple Dutch ovens. And in fact, when I first started baking sourdough, an open bake was how I learned to bake sourdough. I didn't even use a Dutch oven until later. For packaging a sourdough bowl like this, these bread bags are really helpful. It's just really easy. I stapled it shut and then added a tag. This time I left the little greenery off of it and I think it looked a little bit better. But I actually really like to use cake boxes for sourdough, and you can get these in different sizes. These are maybe a little bit too big, but it's what I have on hand, and I always recommend using what you have on hand before buying anything new. So it's what I'm using. And then I would simply just put the bread on top of a clean piece of parchment paper for a finished look. And now I'm adding some really simple wired ribbon. Wired ribbon makes this really easy. I know that there are people out there who can make like really beautiful bows. I am not one of them, but wired ribbon makes it look really finished and it's easy to do and it looks clean and beautiful. And I think this would be really nice with a little jar of jam, maybe even a little flour sack towel or something else to go with that bread. I hope these gave you some ideas for how you can gift sourdough and create meaningful and lasting memories with your loved ones this holiday season. And I hope you are off to a beautiful holiday season. Thanks so much for stopping by today.